Hi, my name is Michael Swartz. In this lesson, we're going to take a look at how to create an eye in Maya, and we'll also review how to make procedural textures using ramps, as well as painting in Photoshop. Let's switch over to Maya now, and let's take a look. Let's look at this from the side view, and let's create a NURBS primitive circle. Rotate it in 90 degrees in Z, and let's scale it up about 5. Okay, and we're going to duplicate that, Control D, and move it over so that there's an intersection in between, and we're going to use this curve to cut this curve. So we'll select that, and then we'll go to the, make sure you're in a modeling menu set, go to the curves menu, and we're going to use this cut option. And then we can select this and this. All right, and now we just need to make another cut for the pupil and along the middle of this. So I'm going to create a EP curve tool here. All right, and go to the options and make sure it's set to linear. All right, and I'm going to just hold down the X key and snap to the grid and make a little square, and let's scale that down and move it over, maybe a little bit more. Okay, and we'll take that, and then curves, cut, and we'll get rid of all that stuff. And that. And one more time with that curve, EP curve tool, and this time we'll just cut in the back here. And go to curves, cut. Okay, we'll delete that, and we don't need that. Okay, select all that. Alt-Shift-D or Option-Shift-D to delete the history on it. And now take these two curves and let's combine them, or attach them rather. If you go to the curves menu, go to the attach options, and let's use blend, but let's insert a knot so that it's a nice sharp edge there. Let's click attach. All right, Alt or Option-Shift-D to delete the history. And let's go into the outliner here. And you can see the other curves are still there. I forgot to delete those in the creation settings for the attach operation, so let's just delete them. All right, so we have this nice curve, and we can create an eye just using a revolve operation. So let's go to Surfaces, Revolve, Options, and reset the settings. And let's revolve around the Z direction. And go down to the bottom here. Polygons is the output, control points, and click revolve. Okay, so the normals are reversed on it. Let's go to mesh display and reverse and press the 3 key. And you can see it smooths out pretty nicely, but it might be a little too smooth around this edge right here. So what I'm going to do is just select that edge loop and then bevel it. All right, and we can sharpen that up a bit. And if you want it really sharp, you can add an additional segment. But I think I'm going to leave it a little bit smoother, like that. And the fraction is 0.1. Okay, so this will make a pretty decent sclera and iris geometry type. Now let's work on the lens itself. So let's go to the right view again. And let's create a... and actually, let's hide these for now. Let's Control H, hide them. Let's create another curve, circle curve rather, NURBS circle. Rotate it in 90 and Z. Scale it up 5. Now, we were a little bit bigger. We were the exact same size previously. I'm going to just make this a little bit bigger. So let's do 5.1. All right, now we're going to make the bulge for the lens, and I do need to see the other shape while I'm doing this, so I'm going to just reveal the shape itself. And yeah, I think this curve needs to be a little bit bigger. Okay, now duplicate that curve, and we want to make the lens bulge. So I'm going to scale this down and move it forward. Scale it down. Move it forward, and I'm basically going to have this little bit of a bulge outside of the iris. And you can see I'm lining it up with the top of the edge. If we take a quick peek at Photoshop here, you can see the iris is right about here. And so that bulge of the lens starts right at the top of the iris. Something like that. Okay, so now I can hide this again. And I'm going to take this, and we'll do the same thing as before, cut. Okay, get rid of that, and that. All right, and I'm going to make a curve going right down the middle. So we'll select Create, Curve Tools, EP Curve Tool. Okay, and we'll take that, and that, and that, and cut. Okay, so delete all those things. So now we just have the top part, and we can revolve this after we attach. So let's, oh, there's a little piece there. So select that, and attach them. And let's go into the options here, and let's not keep the originals this time. And let's definitely insert a knot, and the blend bias, we can change that to 0.1 and click apply. All right, let's close that. Alt Shift or Option Shift Delete the history. And now we can revolve this. So let's go to Surfaces, Revolve, and we're at the same deal in Z direction. We'll use control points. All right, and click Revolve and press the 3 key, and let's let's reverse the normals on us. All right, and same issue as before. I think we need to add another loop there. So I'm going to just grab that edge going around, that edge loop, and bevel, and just tighten that up a little bit. There we go. All right, so that is the lens. Let's call it GeoI lens. And this other one is GeoI iris sclera. Okay, and let's put on the wireframe unshaded. And let's reveal the other shapes, Shift H to reveal those. And I'm going to just select everything, delete the history. And these two curves, I'm going to keep them just in case I want to use them later for something. So GRP, let's call this creation curves, and we'll hide it. Control H. Don't know why there's a duplicate side view there. All right, and then the geometry, let's put that into a group as well. GRP, GeoI. All right. Okay, now let's just hide this temporarily, and let's talk about how we can texture and shade this. I'm going to save my scene though. To start, let's call this I creation demo version 01A. So let's take a look at this object that we converted from a NURBS curve to a polygonal object. Whenever you are working with NURBS, they inherently have UVs attached to them already, and that gets converted over to the polygon surface. And let's take a look at it. If we go to the UV menu and then UV editor, we can take a look and see what UVs are available. And you can see it has UVs. Let's take a look at them. It looks like they're probably on top of each other, and there's some facing backwards. But it's shoved off the grid, and really we want our UV space to be right here in the 0 to 1 range. And we also want to have a UV system that's easily paintable. And unfortunately, this is not going to be very easily paintable with these existing UVs, so I'm going to make a new UV projection for this that will be a little bit more logical to work with, both in Maya and in Photoshop if we decide to paint this eye manually. So I want to do a projection going down the z-axis. So we'll select this object, go to UV menu, go to planar, and let's just reset the settings here. And I want to project down Z, and we're going to use this keep image width height ratio. That's really important. All right, so we'll have that, and then click on project. All right, and now you can see it's placed it down here, and that's exactly what we want. And then I'm going to take, I want to basically open up the back so that it's not just a repeat and the textures aren't overlaid. You can see that our UVs in the back here are flipped, right? And that's why it's noted as red in Maya, and the blue are forward-facing UVs. So we need to make some cuts in the back here, and it's not going to be really visible in the it's not going to be visible inside of the character's head. So I'm not too worried about what they look like, but I want to at least not have flipped UVs like this. So I'm going to make some cuts there and open up the mesh a bit, open up the UVs rather. So shift right click inside the UV editor, and we'll just use this cut operation. Okay, and then what I'll do from here is just select just these UVs in the back. Okay, just those. And then we'll shift right click, and we can use this unfold operation. And you can see it only unfolded the backs, and now they're no longer red. The problem is now that we're taking up more UV space than we should. We're going over the borders. So I'm going to grab all the UVs, and let's rotate this. And you could probably use the layout to do this as well, but I'm just going to manually scale it down. But just so you know, if you wanted to do this kind of automated style, you can also go up to shift right click, and then layout, and then you can lay out UVs. Go to the options here. Okay, but for now I'm just going to scale this up and do this manually. There we go. All right, and you can see that the center is nice and circular. That's exactly what we want. All right, let's close that. And I'm just going to save that. Okay. So how do we add textures to this? Well, let's hit Shift-T with that object selected. And let's just add a Lambert for now. Go to our Lambert shader, and let's add something to the color. So let's click on the checker pattern, and let's use a ramp and press the 6 key to view the texture in the viewport here. And you can see that right now it's a V ramp. Let's switch this to a circular ramp. So now the texture's starting in the middle, and we could add, let's change this to none temporarily, okay, for the interpolation. And let's say we want the inner part to be like that, maybe like a darker color, and then the next one up could be maybe it's like a brown eye or something. Right, so this could be for the iris. All right, so that's kind of how you could set up an eye, like a procedural based eye. And you could smooth this out. You could go to linear. Let's turn off the wireframe and turn off the grid. Okay, so a pretty quick way to add texture procedurally. Now, also something that I should point out with these ramps, you can plug in different things to these colors. So for example, this brown color, we're representing the iris. We could plug in something else. This could be another ramp or another texture. Let's just, for demonstration purposes, let's try this out. So for this part right here, I'm going to plug in another ramp. And I find that, well, the viewport, depending on your graphics card, may not be able to view this part, what I'm doing right now, in the viewport. So I often work on the ramps separately and then combine them later. So I'm going to open up the hypershade here. And let's click on that object. Let's load the shading network on it. And what I'll do instead, right now I have the ramp, that first ramp plugged into the color of the Lambert. Let's switch it so that ramp 2 is plugged into the Lambert instead. So we'll click on this color, out color, and go over to this Lambert. And now we should see this other ramp. So we can work on this separately, because viewport 2.0 doesn't render nested ramps for some reason. Maybe it does on different computers with different cards, but on my computer it doesn't. So right now we're using a V-ramp. That's the default. Let's try, and let's take a look at this actually in the UV editor too. This will give us a nice view of what the texture looks like. Okay, let's try rainbow. Let's try radial. Aha. All right, radial is, I think, what we want. And you can see it emanates from the middle. And it goes outward. Let's modify the ramp itself. Okay, so we could easily duplicate these. So from here, you can see that we have like our own kind of rainbow striations. We could vary it. We could, you know, make it a little bit noisier. We can add some distortion to it. You can go beyond these as well. Okay, and then you could combine that now with the other ramp. So we can have that ramp plugged into this, which it is already, but we just want to switch this out color back so that that one's in control. Now again, we can't preview it in the viewport. Let me see, just check in viewport 2.0, see if there's a way that we can bake unsupported texture types. Let's do something like 512, rebake all textures. Yeah, it still doesn't really display it the way we want to see it. But let's switch our rendering engine to something like Mental Ray or Arnold. Now let's use Mental Ray. All right, so you can see that's how all the ramps combine together. So you can use nested ramps to create all kinds of interesting effects. That works really well, I think, if it's not such a realistic character, if it's more cartoony. And you can get very detailed, but it makes a lot more sense to just paint these. And so to do that, that's the next thing I wanted to demonstrate. So with the eye selected, let's go over to the UV editor. And I'm going to just export out this as a screenshot. So create a UV screenshot, image, UV snapshot. And let's change the file format to an IF. That's fine. Now let's go back to Photoshop. and you can see that it has a transparency on it, and there's just a layer with some pixels on it. Let's call this layer UV template and make a new solid color. And the solid color should be white, and this will be BG white. Okay, we don't need the mask on that. Let's get rid of that. And you can see our eye texture is shaded on this pretty nicely. And so this part it definitely requires some manual painting and work. You might want to take a photograph and use that as a reference or something to start off from, at least. But in my case, I'm going to just show you how to paint something like this from scratch. Let's save this file, get it all set up. All right, this will be iris paint version 01. Okay. And we're going to save this as a Photoshop document, and we're going to put this in the right place. It belongs in the source images folder, and let's make a folder for it. Should always do this. We'll call this eye painting, or let's just call it eyes. Click create and save. Okay, so we made this UV layout right in the center of the grid, which is perfect. It makes it easier for us. And what I often do is I'll make some guides. So I'll create a new guide layout, and I'll just set it up so that it has 2 columns and 2 rows. And that puts them right in the middle if you check this center columns button. And that is helpful when it comes to keeping everything symmetrical and lined up with your UVs. So I'm going to use an elliptical marquee tool and hold down Option or Alt and Shift, and just scale up. And we're going to make a fill. We're going to fill this with a color. And I'm going to make a new layer above the BG white, but below the UV template. And let's just fill this with blue. And let's zoom in, and I'm going to make another one right here. And this will be the pupil. And same layer. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is command click on that so it loads it as a selection, and make a new layer above that. And let's go up to filter, and let's create clouds. Okay, and with that, I'm going to command D to deselect, and press the select the layer, and then go to the blending modes, and let's shift the blending mode to experiment with how that might overlay on top of the colors below it. Okay, I think that's pretty good. And one thing you might experiment with is using the min-max filter on this. So let's go to filter, other, and these minimum and maximum filters can do some really interesting things with the texture. Let's take a look. Zoom in a little closer, and let's change the values. You can see how it kind of creates those shapes that we were looking at, the muscles and the iris. So I'm going to just experiment with these values, maybe crank that up to 100, 120. Too much. Okay, I'm going to go a little lower actually. Let's go to something like 35, almost back where we started. Okay, so let's click OK. I think that's fine. And let's turn off the template just for a moment to see what we have so far. Cool. All right, so I'm going to just call that portion done for now. Let's name these though while we go. So this layer right here, let's call this the iris base color. And this one would be the iris clouds. And let's make another group on top of this. Let's call this pupil. And we'll use the guides again and draw another circle. And for this, I'll fill it to black as well. But I'm also going to use my eraser tool and set the edge to a very hard edge. All right, and we'll just scale up the brush a little bit, and I want to make this uneven intentionally. So let's set the opacity to 100%. And just kind of cut around this, and we're going to use this to blend and paint that center part right around that pupil. Okay, so it's a little irregular. All right, and then with that pupil layer selected, let's use actually we can command click on this layer here to just make a selection, and we'll use a filter to branch that out a little bit. Let's go up to blur, and let's use a radial blur. And instead of using the actual spin method, we'll use a zoom method. And let's try something like 77. Okay, let's go actually more. Let's do 100. And you can hit Command F again to get that a little bit better. Now we can play around with this clouds. You can see what we just created, right? That could be a really nice opening for the pupil. And I'm going to blend this a little bit by decreasing the opacity. All right, and I'm going to, the iris below that is a little bit bigger. So what I'm going to do is command click on that, and then click on the iris clouds, and we'll make a mask around it. Okay, so now it's correct. Okay, now from here, I'm going to turn off the guide, so command semicolon or control semicolon the PC. And I'm going to basically merge a copy. Actually, before I do that, let's start painting some of these striations on top. I'm going to make a, I guess it does make sense to merge a copy. I'm going to just copy all of these, and we'll merge a copy. And so duplicate, Command E. There we go. All right, so we have that on its own layer. And the tool that I often use for this kind of stuff is either like a brush tool or using the smudge tool. So over here, if you click on the blur tool icon, this little drop, water drop, if you click on smudge tool, we can experiment with the settings up here. Strength is 50 by default. Let's experiment with the quality of the brush as well. It's a very soft brush. Let's harden the brush. All right, and then what we can do is start to draw some of these striations. Okay, and let's shrink the brush down a little. And as I'm pulling these out, I'm just kind of waving them a little bit. Okay, and I want to also get some of these brighter pieces as well. And that might be, something where I add a different layer. I might want to have the darker portions of the eye on its own layer. Okay, and I want to increase the strength here so I can drag it out a little bit further. Whoop, a little too far. Let's go. Okay, I'm going to add another layer above this, and I'm going to just grab some of these colors using a brush. I'm going to hold down Option and grab some of these colors and just kind of make some spots here and there. And you could make these brighter if you wanted to, but I'm going to start with this base color. Okay, and then we'll go back to the smudge tool. The smudge tool. All right, and just pull out. Let's increase the strength of that. You can see how this will really start to look nice as you add lots of different layers. Okay, I'm going to add a little dot of a brighter blue now. It doesn't take much, just a little tiny bit. Pretend you're Bob Ross of the eyes. Okay, then you can also add the sample all layers, and that kind of allows you to pick up color from the other layers below it and mix them. I'm going to change the strength of this to be a little lower though. Maybe 45 or 50, somewhere around there. Okay, one thing you can do with this layer that we've just painted is you can add a layer style to it. So let's double click on that and let's try adding a drop shadow. And it's obviously way too strong, but let's maybe make that a little softer and bring the opacity down. And we can also get rid of the offset so it's like right on top of it. And then we can play around with the opacity. All right, and what you can do is then take that idea and push it forward with another layer. So let's add a layer on top of that. And with this one, again, we'll use the smudge tool. But this time I'm going to use a slightly different blue and drop just a few, oops. Okay, and this would be the outer edge of all those muscles. And then we'll use the, we could, for this one, we could use that blur tool again, actually. So to do that, let's load up the selection, the pupil, copy so command, click on that. And then make sure you're on the right layer. Click on that layer that we're going to apply the blur to. Go to Filter, and let's use that radial blur again. Okay, a little too much. Let's go back to the settings there and maybe do half of that. There we go. All right, now from that we can use our smudge tool and sample all layers. That's fine. I'm going to increase the strength. Okay, and then from there we can experiment with the same kind of effect here. I'm going to just copy this layer style. Paste. And I think it's a little too dark, so I'm going to just decrease the opacity of that. You can try rotating it. Oh. Okay, so that's the basic process. I'm not going to go too much further. I think this is pretty good for now. You can experiment with the color of the sclera itself. Not perfect white, but close. You could try adding a gradient. And let's do a radial. And maybe change the color here to that sort of off-white. And then this will be white though. And then let's add maybe some veins on this. And for this we can use the a brush. And let's change this to be kind of a pinkish color. And let's decrease the flow. And let's see how that looks. This could be nice, actually. Let's just keep that low, though. And scale down the brush. So it's very subtle, but that's all it needs, I think, just a little tiny bit. Okay, so that's a basic start to an eye. I mean, it requires a lot more painting than this, but that's the basic process, though. I use the brush tool and the smudge tool to a great extent. So let's save this and export it out as a targa or a TIFF. We don't need the layers, and we'll put that iris paint version 01A, that's fine. But let's call this underscore diffuse so we know what it is. All right, click TIFF. All right, there we go. And another thing that we could do is, well, we can do this part in the Maya. I was going to suggest that we make a bump map here, but we can actually do that in Maya too. So let's go back to Maya and load up, instead of a ramp on that Lambert, let's break that connection and connect it instead to the file that we just made. Okay, so let's do a file. Okay, so it looks like it's a little too big. So what I'm going to do is actually modify that in Photoshop. So I'm going to take all those layers. Let's turn the visibility on for those as well. Turn on that UV template. I guess I mistakenly assumed that was the edge of the iris, but it's actually a little bit further in. I'm going to move this right to the center and hold down Option and scale it in. And I think the edge is a little too harsh, so let's soften that a little bit. Could do that a bunch of different ways. One way is we could just take this pupil copy, duplicate it, Command J, and let's just blur it. Let's go to blur, and let's use a Gaussian blur. Save as. There we go. Okay, now the next step is to create some shaders for all of these. Right now we just have this basic Lambert. And that might be okay for the inside, but the outer piece, depending on the render engine, it really needs to be the outer piece, the sclera, the lens part, needs to have a more shiny texture to it. So let's go into the geo here and let's reveal the lens again. And I'm going to use the Arnold render engine for this. So to do this, let's switch our render engine to be Arnold. And you know what, let's use a render token here, right click. So all our renders will just go into a they'll be named after the scene, and they'll go into a folder named after the scene as well. And that's fine, we'll use perspective for now. It's just for testing. Okay. All right, so let's add a new Arnold shader for this. So Shift T and go to the Arnold shader list, and let's add a standard Arnold shader. Let's give this a name. Lens AI standard. We could probably use a glass preset to start, and then what we want to do though is make sure that the geometry in the actual geometry shape node under the Arnold tab, you want to make sure this opaque is unchecked. And then back in the Arnold shader itself, let's scroll down and make sure that let's see, let's go to the refractions. And all right, so right now the index of refraction, the IOR, is set to glass, and the I is more like water. It's like 1.33, but I found that that's often a little bit too extreme. So I'm going to do something like 1.15 for now, and I'll increase or decrease as I need to later. Unfortunately, you can't really preview anything in the viewport with Arnold. It's on the Mac, at least. It's not really very helpful. But we should be able to, with this, we should be able to do a little test render and see how it looks so far. So let's turn on wireframe unshaded, and let's also add a light. So go up to Arnold, lights. Let's do the sky dome light to start. And let's open up the IPR. Okay, and I'm just going to make a selection around this and decrease the intensity of the sky dome. Okay, and we'll also create another light. Okay, let's go to that AI shader again. And I want to make sure that the Specularity is also active. Yep, it is. And should be using a Fresnel. And we can also experiment with the reflection. Sometimes you got to start the render over. So yeah, the intensity is very low. That's why it's not showing up any reflections or anything. So let's do another IPR. And we'll increase the intensity of this light. Okay. You can now see the reflection on the lens. Okay, one other thing that I suggest is maybe adding a touch of subsurface scattering to the eye as well. So, but before I do that, I'm going to just hide the sky dome for a moment. And so now we just have that one key light. And let's go back to that sclera, or the lens, the eye lens standard here that we've created, and scroll down to subsurface scattering. And let's just give this a little bit of subsurface scattering weight. Not too much. It's too much. You want to make the eye cloudy, but just a little bit. Okay. Now, another thing we can do to add more realism to this is to add a bump map to the iris. I'm going to pause the rendering here, save my document. You should always do that before you do this kind of maneuver, because it's kind of a complicated thing to try to do when IPR is going. Let's move those lights out of the way and zoom in here. And right now, let's see, the inner eye there, let's just map that. Okay, so that's the texture. So basically what I want to do is create a bump map from this diffuse. You could do this easily in Photoshop too, but just to illustrate a point, you could do this in Maya as well really quickly. Let's make a black and white version of this diffuse. So to do that, let's type in a luminance, and then we'll have the out color of that go into the out value. And then the luminance, you can see now we have a black and white version of this, right? And that is going to plug into the bump of the Lambert. So I'm going to connect the out value to the bump. And that's fine now, but this out value didn't get connected, so we're just going to connect this manually. And now let's try rendering just that region. Here we go. So we'd have to, deal with some of these aspects outside. We don't necessarily want those bumped so much. We can also invert this. So let's do a reverse node. And we can have this go into, well, we got to connect that to each one. So okay, so it's connected to all three, and then that would go into the bump value. And we can also maybe smooth the bump so we can soften it. So let's decrease the bump depth a little and then also filter, and we'll filter offset as well too. That smooths out the bump. So still very harsh and strong. So let's do like 0.15. So you might want to make a bump separately in Photoshop because the veins are getting the same treatment as the iris itself. You could fix that in Maya with a ramp or something, but it's probably easiest to just do it in in Photoshop. So anyway, there you have it. That's the basic setup for an eyeball using Maya, Arnold, and Photoshop.